Hey everyone, it's Ordinary Cheese Wizard, and welcome back for one of my favorite videos of the year, where I try to predict who is going to draw each of the 4 units for Choose Your Legends. I'm really excited for this year because I like all of the characters who won, which are Sigurd, Tsubasa, Sylvain, and Azura, so I can't wait to see who draws them, but I think maybe we can try and predict it. To be honest though, after last year's video and looking back on who the artists were, I kind of think it's ultimately random. However, that doesn't mean we have to go in blind. Let's take a look, starting with who has drawn the most Choose Your Legends characters. We're gonna start off basically the same as it was last year. Not much has changed because last year Wada Sachiko and Kita Senri didn't draw anybody, and neither did Kozaki Yusuke. But Niji Hayashi got their second character with Brave Shirena, who looked awesome. And then we haven't seen anything from Hidari in quite some time. And Felix was the last character drawn by Lack. Everybody else has a single unit drawn, including newcomer Manabi Okada, as well as Nishike Ariku and Maeboru, who were all new time Choose Your Legends artists last year. So if we go purely based on statistics, and this is also me including a couple of other things, but then Sigurd has a pretty good chance to be drawn by Wada Sachiko. You'll see this come up again in the Choose Your Legends history section. I think it would be pretty cool if Hidari came back and drew Tsubasa, but the chances of that are pretty unlikely. And then Sylvain could be drawn by Niji Hayashi, and then Azura by Kozaki Yusuke. And that one is maybe more likely because he's drawn her before. So that's how it would go if we went based on statistics, but also kind of randomly. Because Kita Senri has drawn a bunch of characters, but they haven't drawn anybody since CYL 7, so honestly, the statistics are kind of meaningless, but maybe they won't be this year. Now let's go to Choose Your Legends history. And this one I think has a pretty good chance to be correct. So Intelligent Systems loves to have parallels with artists drawing characters who are connected. For example, we have Ephraim and Erika both drawn by Wada Sachiko, or Lucina and Kram both drawn by Kozaki Yusuke. There are several other examples of Wada drawing these connected characters, like both Robins or Roy and Ellie would, so I think it's very, very, very likely, based on what they have done in the past, that Wada Sachiko is also going to draw Sigurd, especially because she drew Seliph. And to be honest, I'm all for that. I love me some Wada Sachiko art, and I think that she would absolutely do Sigurd justice, and that would be super cool. Now, for Tsubasa, there is no connection because IS hates TMS, so that honestly could be absolutely anyone. The only connection that is maybe there is technically it is Tsubasa and Shida, so it could be Kita Senri because she drew Marth, but I don't know how much faith I place in that prediction. Now for Sylvain, I think it would be super cool if we had some additional blue lions drawn by Lack. I adore the art of Dimitri and Felix, and Lack drew both of them. If we go just based on 3 houses, it gets a little bit trickier because it's kind of all over the place, like Marianne was drawn by Kusakihara Toshiyuki, and Gatekeeper was Yamada Akihiro, who haven't drawn anybody else. But I think it's more likely that they might go thematic and bring Lack back to draw Sylvain. And that would be super, super cool. Brave Dimitri still has some of my favorite CYL art, so I would love to see Lack make a triumphant return to do justice to one of my favorite Blue Lions boys. And I think that could be sort of likely just because, again, they love to be thematic about this. However, when we get to Azura, that one is also pretty up in the air. It could be Eswal who drew Brave Corrin, but I think it would still be more likely for it to be Kozaki Yusuke, who also drew Camilla. But since those are really the only two, I don't know. It would be pretty cool to see Eswal give Azura a shot, because we kind of know what it might look like coming from Kozaki Yusuke, but again, that one is also pretty sus as far as predictions go. So if we look at Choose Your Legends history, my predictions would be Sigurd getting drawn by my fave, Wada Sachiko, Tsubasa maybe by Kita Senri, which, I mean, Kita Senri does have 5 CYL credits to her name, so maybe. And then Sylvain drawn by Lack, and Azura drawn by Eswal or Kozaki Yusuke, but for diversity's sake, we're just gonna say Eswal. And that brings us to one of my favorite sections of these videos, where I look at all of the Cypher art and see who has drawn them for Cypher. I thought maybe there would be some kind of correlation with this, but again, this is not super scientific, and based on last year, it didn't seem to matter at all. But hey, we get to look at cool Cypher art, so let's dive in. I'm going to start with Sigurd because this one has me super excited. The person who has drawn the most Sigurd Cypher art is none other than Suzuki Rika. And we stand Suzuki Rika here, and she does an amazing job drawing Sigurd. So I would love that. I don't know how she would top Legendary Sigurd, which is still one of my favorite arts in the entire game, but if anyone can do it, it's probably her. The other people who have drawn Sigurd that we would know of from Fire Emblem Heroes are Mayo, which I thought was super interesting because Mayo tends to draw like younger looking female characters for the most part, or at least the ones that I remember. So seeing a Sigurd in Mayo's style would be really cool. And then Kita Senri actually drew a Sigurd. So again, could be Kita Senri. Maybe this is the year that Kita Senri comes back for CYL. Who knows? But I'm hoping for some Suzuki Rika art. If we look at Tsubasa, Tsubasa's only had one artist for the majority, or an artist who has drawn one card for the majority of her art, except for Daigoman, who has drawn 2. But I believe Daigoman also drew some Shirenas, and again, that didn't matter last year, so it probably won't matter this year. But Kozaki Yusuke is also on that list, which is pretty cool. It's almost like Kozaki Yusuke does a lot of art for this game. Who would have thought? Now when we get to Sylvain, this one is also interesting and maybe a little surprising because Niji Hayashi has drawn Sylvain twice for Cypher cards. And I actually have one of them, and I love that card, and it makes me laugh. The other person who has drawn some Sylvain is Misei Ito, but again, who knows? I think they tend to go with people who've drawn Fire Emblem Heroes art before, but maybe not. And then Azura has had a ton of Cypher cards drawn. Sigurd actually has 15 different Cypher cards, but Azura has 18. And it's not like anybody is running away with those like in Sigurd's case. So it could be anybody. Some that we might recognize would be Sachi, Kita Senri again, Kibun has done one, and Fuzichoko has done a couple, and I love Fuzichoko, so that would be cool too. As well as Hagiya Kaoru, which was pretty cool to see on that list. So if we're going just based on who's drawn the most of each character on their Cypher cards, that would be Sigurd drawn by Suzuki Rika, which again would be sick as hell. Tsubasa drawn by Daigomen. Sylvain drawn by Niji Hayashi, which again is just a guess, but who knows. And then Azura, I just picked Fuzichoko because, like I said, I like Fuzichoko and I would love to see that. So there are my Cypher picks. And now we'll go into the current artist, so whoever has drawn the most of each of these characters in Fire Emblem Heroes. We'll start again with Sigurd. So as I said, Legendary Sigurd has some of my favorite art in the entire game, which is Suzuki Rika. We also have 2 drawn by Momo Jirushi, which are Emblem Sigurd, and then Do Sigurd with Eldigan. This is not my favorite art in the game, so I'm kind of hoping that maybe CYL Sigurd goes to somebody else. There are some other great options if we're just picking from his Fae artists. Niji Hayashi has done a Sigurd. And then we also have a Zutaro, who I adore, and I think that would also be really great. Sata also drew base Sigurd, but we haven't seen a ton of art from them as far as I know, so I think it's way more likely that Suzuki Rika would maybe get in there, or again, Niji Hayashi has been doing a ton of art lately, so that could be possible. And then Momo Jirushi has also done several of the more recent Sigurd art, so it's definitely a possibility. Tsubasa is super easy. She has only been drawn by Azutaro. And I love that art. I think it's fantastic, so that would be great. Maybe Azutaro will draw 2 people in CYL and set a new precedent for who gets to draw each of these characters, but I don't think so. Moving on to Sylvain, both base Sylvain and Summer Sylvain were drawn by Argan, and I love Argan's style, and I would be super happy to see Sylvain drawn in that kind of soft, nice style that they have. And then Spring Sylvain was drawn by Suakane Kumiko, and that's not my favorite, but I'm probably biased because I hate the spring banners, so take that for what you will. And Azura has the most versions out of any of these characters, so Kaya 8 has drawn most of them, with base Azura, Performing Arts, New Year's, Young, Hatari, and Legendary Azura, and I love Kaya 8's style. I love the almost cel-shaded look that it has. I know that for Hatari Azura, she went and did a little more shading, but I love the original type style, and I think it would be really cool for her to get to draw Brave Azura because she's drawn so many of the other ones. However, we've also gotten some really, really good Azura art from some of my other favorite Fae artists, including Tefish drawing Attuned Azura, and Kakage drawing Resplendent Azura, which this is gonna be a tough one. If any of those artists draw her, I think it'll be fantastic. We also did just get Ilian Azura, who is drawn by Saine. I don't know how to say that, I'm sorry. But I think if we're betting, I would go on Kaya 8. So if we look at who has drawn each of these characters the most, it's actually for Sigurd a tie, but I'm just gonna say Suzuki Rika because I like her the best. For Tsubasa, it would be Azutaro with no competition, Sylvain would be Argan, and Azura would be Kaya 8. This category is fun to look at, but I think has absolutely no bearing on Choose Your Legends. It doesn't seem to have any correlation with who ends up drawing them, and in fact, it tends to appear that most of the time they bring in a different artist to draw a character, even if one artist is known for drawing them the most. And I'm okay with that, because I think while it is fun and kind of cool to see our favorite artists who draw them all the time give it another shot, it's, I think, more fun to have somebody new come in and show us their interpretation of the character. So that's all of the predictions based on data in quotation marks, because I don't know how legit this data collection has been, but those are my predictions just based on what we have available to us. But now I'm gonna throw out 4 rounds of artists that I just think would be really cool to see draw these characters based on who else they've drawn and their style. So in round 1, I have Sigurd getting drawn by Sotaro. And Sotaro has drawn some really nice artwork. They haven't drawn that many characters, but they did do Basilio and people like Pirate Sorter, which is kind of a funny pick because that seems really different from Sigurd. But their style is really soft and pretty and detailed, and I think it would be really interesting to see Sigurd in that style. For Tsubasa, I have selected Mai Okuma, who has also drawn some of my favorite art in the game. I love their version of Shida, and I think that seeing Tsubasa in that style would also be really cool. They also drew Braver Makaya, and having somebody who has drawn two characters together might be an asset in this case because Tsubasa is technically with Shida. So we'll have to see kind of what they decide to do with that. I'm really excited, and I hope that we do get some version of Shida in there with Tsubasa. I'm not sure how likely that is because Tsubasa does have like a billion outfits in TMS, and I know there are certain videos that people are hoping they pull from in order to draw her, and it would be kind of weird probably to put Mirage Shida in a similar outfit. So this will be super interesting because we've never had like a duo win, and I don't know if they're even going to pay attention to Shida, but I think that that would be really, really interesting. For Sylvain, I had picked Ekyao, who has drawn a lot of other Three Houses characters. So characters like Ash, Dorothea, Manuela, and I think that that would be really interesting. And also go with that Three Houses signature style. So it would kind of look just like in-game Three Houses Sylvain, but I still think that that would be fun. And Ekyao has a really clean style, and I think Sylvain would look pretty cool like that. And for Azura, I have picked an artist called Zis. And Zis has only drawn Tharja, original Tharja, in Fae, which is not my favorite art. However, this pick is solely because of Azura's cipher card drawn by them, which looks incredible, and I would love to see that art come to Fae. So, my round 1 picks are Sigurd drawn by Sotaro, Tsubasa drawn by Mayakuma, Sylvain by Ekyao, and Azura drawn by Zis. And now for round 2. So starting again with Sigurd, I would love to see Sigurd drawn by Hakan. I'm sure this is not a surprise to anybody who's watched my videos because I love Hakan's really soft blended style. It would be super interesting too because Hakan has not drawn too many men. I think it's just Garnef and Hawkeye. And those characters don't really seem to be like knightly like Sigurd. So that would be super, super interesting. And to be honest, I could totally see it because like T Sigurd drawn by Suzuki Rika is also very soft and looks incredible. So I just really want to see Hakan get a CYL credit because I think everybody gets pretty excited when their art comes out. So that would be very cool. For Tsubasa, I have selected Tefish. I think that Tefish could definitely make Tsubasa look incredible. I love Emblem Erica's art. I think Pala's art is really, really great. And I also like Tiki's art, which is more recent, along with Attuned Azura. For Sylvain, I have picked Nanafuji. And this one would be interesting because the only two characters that Nanafuji has drawn are Valentine's Claude and T. Felix. But I think that that's kind of funny because they're both Three Houses characters, and so is Sylvain. I think that Sylvain would look awesome in that style, especially because they've drawn Claude, and I feel like Claude has that like mischievous aura about him, and he's winking, and Sylvain is definitely a winker, so I think that that would look cool too. And then for Azura, I have picked Akka. I thought Akka drew way more characters, but it's really only a handful. It's Altina, Resplendent Katria, Emblem Edelgard, Thief Layla, and Resplendent Lucina, and I love all of those arts. These are Resplendents that I definitely have left on. Emblem Edelgard's art is so great. Whenever I use her, I'm just like, wow, this art slaps. So I think that Akka could do a really great job drawing Azura and make it interesting and fresh. I would love to see it. So for round 2, that's going to be Sigurd drawn by Hakan, Tsubasa drawn by Tefish, Sylvain by Nanafuji, and Azura by Akka. Moving into round 3, I have Sigurd drawn by Hagia Kaoru, which is probably, again, not a surprise because I think Hagia Kaoru can just make the men look pretty handsome. So, Resplendent Longku, I love that art. I love Zelgius as a ninja, and also Legendary Male Byleth. So I think that Sigurd in that knight archetype would definitely look awesome in that style. For Tsubasa, I picked another one of my favorites, which is Toby. I love Toby's style. Some of my very favorite units have been drawn by Toby, including Clan. So I would love to see Toby's take on Tsubasa, which I think the softness of Toby's style would really lend itself to drawing Tsubasa and maybe also Shida. For Sylvain, I have picked Nishiki Ariku, who also does a fantastic job drawing men, making them look great. Again, some of my favorite art in the game. Summer Dimitri, mostly because of that water cape. I just absolutely love that cape, and I kind of want one for myself, but I'm getting off track. Other characters that Nishiki Ariku has drawn are Asker, Dua Asker, and Harvest Halloween Asker, which I love both of those units, and I think the art is absolutely fantastic. And I think that Sylvain would look incredible in that style. Interestingly, they have also drawn several Three Houses characters, and also Hope So. We've got Shez, we've got Saros, Geralt, Ingrid, Dimitri, Claude. So there is kind of a history of Three Houses art in their past, and maybe in their future. And finally, for Azura, I've picked Neon, who hasn't drawn that many characters, but again, some of my favorite art in the game, including Naga, Attuned Micaiah, and Citrine. I think this style would suit Azura really well, and I would love to see Neon also get a CYL credit. So, for round 3, that is Sigurd, drawn by Hagiya Kaoru, Tsubasa by Toby, Sylvain by Nishiki Ariku, and Azura by Neon. And for the final round of round 4, first we have Sigurd, drawn by Riz3. If you tell me that is pronounced Rise, I'm probably gonna cry, so we're gonna say Riz3. And they have drawn characters like recent Iliad Minerva, whose art I adore, Resplendent Titania, which is one of my very favorites, and Valentine's Lucina, that art is just absolutely fantastic. So I would love to see them draw a man. They have drawn a couple. They've drawn Sed, George, and Soth before, so I think it would be interesting to see them take on Sigurd. Next, I have Tsubasa, drawn by Fuzichoko, who I already mentioned in this video, but I love their style, and I think it lends itself more to younger characters. They have drawn young Elise, for example, and she looks adorable, but also characters like Summer Larachelle, whose art I really like, even though I hate the summer banners, and even Bunny Fram. If Tsubasa looked even close to as good as Legendary Sakura, I think we would all be pretty happy. Next up is Sylvain, who I have getting drawn by Asatani Tomoyo. I love Asatani Tomoyo, and they've drawn a lot of characters, but nobody for CYL yet, and I think that would be a nice gesture just to show that, the fans appreciate them. So Asatani Tomoyo recently drew young Felix, whose art is great even though the baby banner is stupid. He still looks awesome. They've also drawn characters like Ira, whose art is great, and then male characters like Berkut and Fernand, who I don't really care about, but the art is wonderful. So I think Sylvain would look really great, drawn by Asatani Tomoyo. We cannot forget that they also drew Summer Innes. Just absolute peak male right there. And finally, I have Azura getting drawn by Sencha. I know around these here parts we are all big Sencha fans, and it would be super interesting because Sencha has drawn a lot of Corrin as well as Camilla, so there is some thematic overlap there as well. I'm not sure how likely it is because they did just draw Tharja, and that's probably pretty unlikely for them to draw something so soon after that, but I don't know how things work at IS, and I would just like to see it. So, for round 4, that is Sigurd, drawn by Riz3, Tsubasa by Fuzichoko, Sylvain by Asatani Tomoyo, and Azura drawn by Sencha. So, those are all of my personal picks. I also wanted to just briefly mention that I think there has been a noticeable change maybe starting last year and then definitely backed up by the loss of the Tempest Trials unit. I think that they are doing some different stuff with the artists. I don't know exactly how to put this into words, but it seems like we're getting some big well-known artists, but a lot of artists who used to come up all the time that we would see on banners, I haven't seen as much of. And I think last year, CYL 9 kind of cemented that in some way in my brain, because Mebaru, who drew Byleth, had only ever drawn Resplendent Dimitri, so that's somebody that we were very unfamiliar with. Same thing with Baldur. Manabi Okada had only drawn Fogado and Halloween Tamara, as well as Resplendent Soren. So that's not too many characters. It's definitely not the same as saying, like, Kita Senri drew this person, where everybody can think of Kita Senri art and think of something that they love. And even with earlier CYLs, there are artists like, it's a lot of overlap where it's Kozaki Yusuke and Wada Sachiko and Kita Senri. And then in CYL 2 and 3, we had Hidari come back to draw Celica and Ulm, which was awesome, but again, very recognizable, big names. It seems to have gone less in that direction in more recent years. I don't think that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just something that I've noticed, and again, with the Tempest Trials units going away and giving us less new art in the game, which is honestly just like heartbreaking to me, it'll be interesting to see what happens this year and if there are any additional patterns that kind of make themselves known as we continue and as we see which artists are getting to draw new characters. I guess the good thing is that even though it seemed like a budget cut reason for removing the Tempest Trial unit, the rest of the banners art doesn't seem to have decreased in quality. It doesn't seem to have astronomically gone up in any way either. There's still art that I love and still art that I'm meh about, but I think overall it's, again, just kind of, it's there. It's not doing anything either way. But I do hope that we get the Tempest Trials units back, because I just love seeing the art. It's one of my favorite parts of the whole game, and I hope that we continue to see art from these artists that I know we all love. So with that, let me know what your predictions are. If you have cracked the code, definitely let me know, and then I can stop making these videos and just reshare your video. I'm so excited for these units. I can't remember being this excited for like a long time because they're from different games. They're all characters that I like. I'm especially excited to see Sigurd and Tsubasa, but I think Azura's art is going to be incredible because she just has so many different ways to interpret her look, and I can't wait to see what they do with them as units. So I'm really excited, and let me know who you're most excited for, both in art and in unit, I suppose. And I hope that CYL treats you well and you get all of the units that you want. If you're going for a +10, I hope it comes easily in the least amount of orbs possible. And as always, keep it cheesy.